We are already past time enough here. I think let's get going. I am curious before we get going, I believe just seeing the people who are listed, Pam, you mentioned the presentation. Just if I'm doing this workshop with a group of people who hadn't been a part of the Joy in All Seasons Summit, I would lay down some groundwork about some of my thoughts on gratitude. But I believe everybody here saw the presentation and has a sense that I'm a little far right or a little far left of the average group on gratitude. Did everyone, I mean, just by show of hands, if you're on video, not everyone is, but did everyone have a chance to see the presentation? Yeah, and I know Heather and Cherie, yes, and thank you, Pam. All right, so that being the case, there are all sorts of things we could discuss, but the purpose of this workshop specifically is to get into how do we apply the ideas of deepening our gratitude to our key relationships. And I even said in the presentation that the reason we focus on key relationships, partly because they're the ones that are affecting us most deeply, but partly because if they weigh the most and we put the right work into them, that will affect our gratitude in all of our other interactions as well. It won't necessarily change every single thing. But as we tend to move ourselves along the scale, it changes how we feel about gratitude. I found that as people work on their key relationships, it has an effect on all the others. If we were to work on how are you saying thanks to just any blow Joe on the street, it wouldn't have quite the same effect. So that's why we focus on key relationships. And I don't always get asked this, but I often get asked, how do you determine key relationships? And that's why the first step on the worksheet, if you have it in front of you, great. If not, like I said, even just a piece of paper works. Key relationships in my mind are an element of our key roles. They connect to us within our key roles in some way, shape, or form that matters, and it helps perform our key roles to some degree. So our first step here is really just that. We're going to take a minute and we're just going to jot down what are my key roles. And there's no right or wrong answer here. It's not like everyone needs to have that I am a professional juggler and I mean, obviously that's not a key role I think any of us would probably identify with, but you guys may surprise me. But by key roles, when someone at a networking event or in a I'm meeting new people kind of situation asks you to tell a little bit about yourself, you commonly list your key roles. I, in my bio, say I am a husband and father of 5. If that's the first thing coming out of my mouth as to what I identify as, there's probably some weight to that role. So just make a list of what your key roles are. I will be silent for a minute or two here, but then may throw out some additional suggestions. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. There's no right or wrong number either. If it feels important to you, if your pen feels like moving, jot it down. So go ahead and do that. I'm going to grab my book here as well. And yeah, just take a moment. I would use music, but because of copyright concerns, I've been told not to use music and things that I'm recording unless I have permission. And ain't nobody gave me no permission. So I will be silent, like I said, for just a minute. Go ahead and jot down key roles. I don't want to interrupt thought flow too much, but as you're jotting things down, start paying attention a little bit to if any of the things that come out of your pen or out of your mind and your heart surprise you. Are there roles in here that you don't commonly think of, or roles that you haven't put a title to before? You know you take care of them, but you haven't really jotted them down in this sense before. And as we do this, I guess the question is, has everyone had time to jot down what they think are their most important key roles? Anyone want a little more time?
I'm good.
Okay. Okay. So as we look at that, the worksheet looks like we just jump straight forward, but I guess I'm curious, as you consider these key roles, they will feel like they have different gravity to them. They will feel like they have different time demands to them. Some of them will be all consuming. Some of them will be, sometimes I feel that role, sometimes I don't. I don't want you to worry so much about which is the biggest or not. What I do want you to worry about in this moment, because we're not going to try and define things in each of these roles. Instead, what we're going to do is pick one of these roles and move forward with it, because once you've gone through it, you then can go back and look at other roles and follow the same pattern. So what I want you to do is just look at the list that's sitting in front of you. And like I asked there, did anyone have any roles come up that surprised them, or that maybe they don't think about that often, that are suddenly popping out at them? Janae's saying hard no. And
I
if
said
not,
ward member.
interesting. Interesting. And a role popping up in a scenario like this doesn't necessarily mean anything. But it can mean something. It can mean, oh, hey, this is a role that needs some consideration, needs some attention. I'll let you make the determination on that. But what I want you to do is look at the list of roles and just ask yourself, which of these is the one I'm supposed to focus on right now? Sounds like a simple question, but if you will ask it and then pause and just listen for a second, it should be, won't always be, but it should be that one of these roles kind of stands out as, hey, pick me. And if that's the case, then go ahead. Heather in the notes is saying she's the family planner, which is an interesting title that I'm sure could be translated a lot of ways. Yeah, that's one I haven't heard before, but if that's a role that you identify with, then great. So everyone pick one of the roles and we will move forward just in that role. So go ahead with whatever role you've chosen and write that right beside on the worksheet where it says key relationships, just so we know what key relationships, key relationships we're thinking of. And as we move forward into this blank, we don't want it to be driven by ego or driven by, another way to say that would be expectation. I mean, if I was to have picked father as the role that I am looking at right now, obviously my children are the obvious choice, and to some degree probably what people would expect me to pick. And picking them does not mean that I'm caving into that. I'm just saying I want you to be aware for a minute here. Am I putting the obvious answer down just because that's the obvious answer, or because, oh, if I picked spouse, yeah, the obvious answer is I better pick my spouse, because if they were looking over my shoulder, that's what they would expect me to pick. And in some scenarios, the role you've picked will have a very obvious answer. But again, I want you to just sit in the silence for a second of who are the people that make this role work for me. It is a silly question in some people's minds, but again, there are things that pop out sometimes. I find sometimes people will look at a role like parenting and say, hey, obviously it's about my kids. Well, if we really look at it, your kids are the responsibility within this role, but are they the ones that are supporting you? Are they the ones that are helping you achieve what needs to be achieved by you in this role? Are they the ones helping you succeed? And they can be, absolutely. There are things within our relationships with our children that depend on those children, but uniquely that also depends on them depending on us, and it can get complicated. But a lot of people, when I describe it that way, will get to a point of realizing, well, it's probably my spouse, maybe my parents, or my circle of influence. I spend more time talking to the neighborhood parents about parenting situations than I do to my kids about parenting situations. So I hope all of that rambling's not the right word, but I hope all of that explanation pushes you to where you can see some of the key roles. And again, whatever your pen feels like putting down is going to be right in the situation. Feel free to jot down anything for the role that you've picked. Who are the people that support you in that role and make your performance in that role possible? So okay, I still see people writing a little bit. I don't want to rush this, but I also don't want people just sitting going, okay, come on, let's go. Um, did anyone have any support roles show up that made you go, huh, maybe I haven't considered that person enough? Not so much. Okay. And that, again, that doesn't always happen, but I have had moments with people where they look at something and they go, I have been completely blind to this role, to this person. And that can make which of these people that we choose to focus on right now more obvious. But if there isn't anything that's shown up that surprises you, that makes you go, oh wow, I really need to consider that one more fully. This one, again, we could look at it and say, pick whichever one feels like you need to spend the most time on, or feels like perhaps you've underserved them to this point. But in doing that, I don't want this to be guilt driven. I don't want it to be that you're looking at something and going, huh, I pick this because I feel the burden of I haven't done what I need to, therefore I must pick this. Um, and having said that, if there is that guilt feeling there, pain of any kind is our body and or our soul telling us that there is something that we aren't in line with and we know needs to be fixed. So picking that person could be the right answer as well. I hope I don't sound overly wishy-washy in determining who you pick. But it really is that, it's who you pick.
So I have a
Yeah.
question.
Yes.
Okay, so um, you're asking us to pick one person from that role that we picked.
Right. So one of the people that supports you in that role, because as we
Who
move farther down,
supports us in that role.
yes. Yeah. So in each role that we fulfill, if we really look at it, it always takes a village. It's never just us. And like I was saying, in some roles, like a spouse, it's super obvious that our spouse is probably our biggest supporter, but there may be other people who support us and make that possible. I have talked with people who, because of marriage problems, get more support as a spouse from their parents or from their close circle of friends than they feel that they do from their actual spouse. Um,
So I will be, okay, where I was before, I couldn't really talk and now I can.
Okay.
I put down the role of teacher because I also teach high school history.
Oh, very cool.
But when I was thinking, when you started to think about more of the roles, I
Hmm.
started realizing that that is much more than just the students I teach history to.
Okay.
Um, Started getting the impression that my husband is not someone I should be a teacher to, but he is my co-creator
Hmm.
with me. We are co-creators together. And then I started listing all the people that I have influence over as a teacher. And then all of a sudden I got overwhelmed because Christ is our ultimate teacher.
Okay.
Um, these are all things I'm just coming through my mind. And then I also have been working on launching my own meditation business that I've been working on lately. And that is where the role really is, where I'm realizing where the influence of the teacher is really coming up, is what I have to share is that teaching ability with what's in me. Had nothing to do with high school teaching.
Hmm.
So there is the thought processes. So now I'm thinking, now that I know where I am, who is the one person you're asking? That's why my whole thought is a little different,
Okay.
but I'm throwing it out there.
Yeah, no, and thank you for sharing that, Sheree. And like I said, there's not going to be an absolute right or wrong in this. Some people, as I go through and guide, how do we pick the supporting person in the role that we're looking at, they'll just say they're all important. And it really can work if I just say, well, pick one. And it will be interesting because they'll just pick somebody, not nonchalantly or flippantly, but they're not getting anything that says this is the person you need to focus on right now. And they'll pick somebody, and we will still have an experience where by the time we're done, they're looking at that supporting person and going, I've really underestimated them and I have not given them the proper space in my mind and in my heart to be able to support them back correctly, to be able to um make this a team effort rather than just they're supporting me and I just expect that of them. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So if the role has brought in branching deviations of what it could mean or what it could be, there's nothing wrong with that. um I do find sometimes picking a role um and sticking with what the first thought about that role was can be the right answer, but I mean, obviously it's not the pen that's guiding us. And I keep saying whatever your pen wants to write on the paper, but again, there's not a wrong answer here either. If it has morphed into something different and that something different is speaking to you as being the thing that you should focus on right now, then yeah, run with it for sure.
Okay. All
So
right. Thanks.
of course. Um, So, I mean, whether you throw it in the chat or you just give me some sort of verbal or visual signal, just want to make sure, has everyone been able to hone in on who is the person that we're going to look at? Because the next step um on our worksheet is cost of results. And I often have considered remaking this to have one more step in it, and I think we'll verbally hit on that step. But has everybody at least picked a person that they recognize as being someone that makes the role that they're focused on happen better? Cool. Okay. And
Yes.
I have had, I mean, this can be anything. Like I said, it can be that you are looking at your role as a spouse and you've picked your spouse. It can be that you have some sort of professional role and that there is someone in your professional environment, whether it's an assistant or even a third-party administrator, not part of your company, but someone who provides something that your company depends on. This can guide you in all sorts of directions, and there's not a right or wrong to it. As we look at that, like I said, the next step on the worksheet is let's look at the cost of the result. And what that title means is they are bringing some sort of result to you. You are interacting with them, and this makes things sound very transactional, but you are interacting with them because on some level, from a very logical standpoint, your subconscious sees that they are filling some sort of need for you. They are carrying some sort of burden that would otherwise be yours to carry, or they're helping you carry a burden that is yours to carry. And your subconscious lets them into your space in a trusted position because it sees that that saves energy. It sees that that saves you some of the effort that would need to go into this otherwise. And that's a simplification for sure. That's very much an oversimplification. We also sometimes let people into our spaces because of what can be very complex situations. And sometimes those situations aren't always healthy. And we're not going to get completely into all of those. Hopefully, and in almost all cases, what I've seen with this, it ends up being that we've picked people where that's not completely the case, although there can sometimes be, yes, I picked spouse. No, things aren't perfectly healthy between myself and my spouse. I don't want to try and psychoanalyze any of that. I don't want to try and act like something that I'm not. I am not credentialed. I've studied a lot about human behavior and thinking and so on, but I am not credentialed in any way, shape, or form to give advice in that realm. But having said that, I have seen people going through this exercise, even in a situation that hurts currently, be able to find better perspective and because of that, be able to cope differently with it. I don't want to make promises that sound over the top, but there can be hope that comes out of this. So we jumped to cost of relationships, cost of results, but we didn't really define the results. So we're going to stay in the section we were just in where we were listing roles, put a circle around the name of whoever you picked. And then whether it's just drawing a box off to the side, if you still have space there, or if you need turning the paper over, I want you to list, what does that person do in their supporting role to the role that you've chosen that helps you have the success that you have. And again, there's not a right or wrong answer here. Jot down whatever comes to mind. But on this one, we may push for a minute as well and try and see if there are things we don't recognize that they do that are helping support you. So let's take a minute on that. Just like Cherie did there, if there are questions as we're going through, if you need clarification, feel free to bring up anything that needs to be clarified.
Hey, can you give one example of how, like, if I picked wife or spouse, my spouse, one example of how he would be in a supporting role? I guess I'm confused about the question.
Okay, so can I ask,
An example might help.
can I ask, what was the role that you chose? You chose spouse, if I heard you right? Like,
Yeah, my role as a wife.
Okay.
My role as a wife.
So your role as a wife, how does your spouse support you in that? I actually happen to pick spouse as well. And as I'm jotting it down here, there are some things that are going to sound misogynistic, but in the same breath, if I don't recognize them, there's an issue as well. But in running our household, on that level of husband and wife, I just started jotting down, like I said, what was coming out of my pen. And my wife is an incredible shopper. She helps us save money all the time because she finds deals and so on. Then I wrote down, she also cooks. We all take turns cooking, but we tend to like it best when mom cooks because she's better at it than the rest of us. And I wrote a few things down like that were just tasks. But then one that just came up that I wrote off to the side was guide, which is an interesting one for me. Not that I see myself as her guide or her as my guide, but there are moments where when she wants to try and guide me in things, I don't take it quite the right way. I take it more as for lack of a better word, nagging than I do
Mhm.
as guidance. But if I will stop and look at things, I will find, oh, hey, wait a minute. That was better advice than I thought it was, you know? So again, there's not a right or wrong answer here. When you get into spouse, I think I am somewhat leaning towards household and raising our children here, but it doesn't have to have that bent to it. But if you were getting an award for being the best wife ever, and we were at the awards ceremony, and you're standing
Mhm.
there holding the award, and you're going to include your spouse on the list of people you're thanking, and there's time for it, what are you going to fill the blank in with? I want to thank them for what have they done that makes you say, yeah, they deserve to be on this very short list of people that I'm thanking who have made me a successful spouse.
Okay,
Does
got
that
it.
help?
Yeah, so what we're grateful for
It can be
in
what we're
them.
grateful for. It can also be, I've never been grateful for that before. I will often see people write things down where they go, as I consider what do they bring to the table. And this sounds very business. I don't want it to be absolute business, but as I've worked with people in a corporate space, it has been that sometimes they look at it and go, I've always treated my assistant like the person who just jots down all of my appointments and makes all of my phone calls.
Mhm.
But they're bringing donuts every Friday, and I never asked them to do that. And everybody loves that they do that. And it doesn't have to be even that they're doing things that are out of the ordinary, as much as it's just, wow, I've compartmentalized them in my head, and there are elements that I'm not thanking them for because I'm not even seeing them.
Mhm. Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Cool. Anybody else have questions in there on that? Okay, I'm going to write down just a couple more thoughts, just a couple more minutes here. Okay, so as we're jotting those down, I know I've asked this in a couple categories, and I don't ask it so much to dig and say I have to have an answer, as much as I want people to have a chance to express if something did surprise them. As you're looking at this person who helps you fill this key role, did anything come out that surprised you? As you're writing down what they do, did anything come out that made you go, either I've never considered that before, or wow, I kind of take that for granted?
I don't feel like I've ever taken this person for granted, but I did see new light, new deeper insight on how this person helps me.
Okay, very cool. Very cool. I had one come up that again, I don't know, we're writing things down quickly in the moment here, but I put down emotional dumping ground. And that one kind of surprised me, not because it surprises me that my spouse can support me with my emotions, but that wording, I do sometimes. I will come home from a frustrating day at work, and she will sense, hey, someone's not wired correctly right now, and she'll help me untangle the wires, but it's often me just venting and dumping, and she takes that. and she takes it very well and will sometimes give some very good advice. Sometimes it's not a let's fix it moment. It's just a, hey, sorry that happened. That sounds rough. But I don't know that I consider that enough or reciprocate that enough. So just pay attention to those sorts of things, whether you choose to share them here or not. That can be the sort of thing we're looking for. Some people will come out of having jotted down some of these responsibilities that this other person fills or things that they bring to the table, and they'll look at their list and say, this all just fits the job description. Not that it's a job description, but they'll look at it and they'll just say, none of this really surprises me. And I think I am aware of all of it already. And I don't want to say that's a sign that we haven't dug deeply enough, but it can be an indicator that perhaps you are compartmentalizing. It can be an indicator that perhaps you are not seeing everything that they're doing. And there can be a side assignment to this. And it takes some bravery, it takes some humility to be able to do this. But I have at times assigned people when they felt that way, like, wow, the list is exactly what you'd expect it to be, nothing surprising here. Especially in a key role that really matters to you, the assignment could be go to that person and don't show them your list. Don't tell them, hey, this is how I see you as being useful in my life, and that's the entire list and nothing more, because that obviously will not bring anything that you want. But go to them and say, hey, I try to see you in the proper light, but what in your role as, and this could be anything you want to put in there, but if you were to go to a spouse, for example, and say, I try to see you, but in your role as my wife, where do you not feel seen? Where do you feel I am glossing things over and not seeing the effort you're putting forward? And they'll look at you funny. They will look at you and go, where is this coming from? But when properly approached, if it's not a situation of, hey, what else do you want from me? You know, I hope you feel the difference there between, I really do want to see you correctly, and I know that I don't see everything, versus going to them and saying, what else am I not seeing in you? Because obviously I'm not seeing enough. If it's laden with guilt or shame, you're not ready for the exercise yet. But if you really can honestly go to them and say, I see these wonderful things in you, but what do you do that I'm not seeing? Where do you feel unthanked or underappreciated? It can be a very telling exercise. There are times where people will report back on that and just say, yeah, I thought my list was complete. And oh my goodness, there's so many things that they do that the unseen that I talked about with my mom, that exists in all of our relationships. And if we're willing to have that what lack I yet attitude, it can be very, very useful. This next step, I think, is the hardest step when we get into cost of results, because none of us can fully grasp what it costs somebody else to provide on the level that they provide, whether it's emotional or spiritual or physical effort, time. None of us completely know. And I get asked all the time, then, well, if we can't know, how do we go about assessing this cost? And you can go to someone and ask them that question as well. You know, I see that you do this and you do it so well, you do it so naturally, but I don't understand what it costs to be able to do that. There's a story of a pianist who was award-winning, incredible pianist, had played concert halls around the world, and she would get asked or get told all the time, oh boy, I wish I could play like you. And she would look at people all the time and say, no, you don't. You don't wish you could play like me. And they would be a little bit offended by it. And she said, if you understood what it has taken for me to get to this level, and the number of hours and hours and hours of just scales and arpeggios and what everyone sees as the boring part of playing piano. If you wanted to do it, you would have done it. And not everything that the person in this role that we're assessing is going to be on that level. Have any of you ever been recognized by someone for doing something that you thought nobody saw? Has anyone ever pointed out, oh, hey, wow, I saw that you did this, and that means the world to me? Has anyone had an experience like that?
My daughter Mirth recognizes amazing things. She is completely insightful, and the way she thanks me touches me deeply.
Sorry, Sheree, say it again.
I said, my daughter Mirth is very insightful, and she has done that to me many times. And the way she thanks me touches me deeply because she sees things that many other people or children haven't. So she's just an incredible, it's just part of who she is.
That's cool. And some people are able to do that quite naturally. Some people struggle in trying to figure out how to do that. Sorry for the pause there. I don't want to say that we are trying to do things so that we can feel like we're having the effect your daughter's having for a self-gratifying reason. As much as we want to make people feel like your daughter's made you feel. And that comes from understanding cost. That comes from really looking at things and recognizing how deeply it costs them. And some things it may not cost them tons. I don't want to say that every scenario that we look at that there is going to be some deep secret, we've never noticed it thing. It really can be stuff that's right in front of our nose, but that we just haven't assessed it. I talk in the book, and this is going to sound very LDS language for a minute, but I talk in the book about the idea that we aren't supposed to just tally all of the tender mercies that come to us. But that what we need to look at is an assessment of the tenderness of those mercies. When we just count blessings, when we just say, well, I have this and this and this and this, I call that a width or a breadth of blessings. But it seems to go wider and wider without going deeper at all. And instead of looking at it and saying, well, I have all of these things, there are lots of things, why do I not feel more because of my gratitude? If we will take one thing and look at it more fully, that's what starts to drive things deeper. Is this helping? Is it guiding us in how? I'm giving all sorts of amble here about explanation of what cost means, and maybe it's not needed. Maybe I've jumped off the deep end before. As you look at the role of the other person that you're looking at, is it already obvious to you, oh, hey, there's more cost here? Or are you able to assess some of what that cost is? Is the explanation even needed?
No, I think it's important because I Okay, so like my husband is more logical and you are approaching this in a more logical way, which I like because a lot of times I will feel things more emotionally.
Okay.
And um, you need both in life to assess it. And so a lot of times with gratitude, what I have done is I would like to pull in the emotion. I meditate a lot. So I will pull in the emotion of the feeling
Okay.
to be able to hold on to that feeling. However, which I have done for this particular person before. However, to actually see an entire sheet of, and I've never taken the time to write down this. It
Okay.
has hit me deeper because I wrote it down.
Okay.
So
And
yeah, I think it's needed.
that's exactly what we're going for. And it's interesting. I mean, this could just be a journaling exercise every once in a while. And you can take it from that approach. You, instead of saying, what are all of my key roles? What are all of, you could look at it and simply say, hey, I am struggling in this relationship, but I feel like I'm doing all of the things that need to be done to see that this relationship could be healthy. What more can I do? And you could sit down and journal through, well, what does this person bring? And it might be the same things you wrote down last time. It might be an identical list. But if you come in with the intent of, I want to see this person more fully, so that I can show up for them in gratitude more fully, you'll see things, you'll find things. And it might not be in the moment when you're journaling. It might be that you just put that on paper and it puts it out of your head. I love J.K. Rowling's idea of a pensive or a pensieve, some people in the movies call it, where you just pull ideas out of your head and put them into this swirling goo of magical thoughts to be able to pick them up and address them later. And I think our subconscious often picks up and addresses them later after we've just gotten them out of the way. We've pulled it aside and said, this one's important, we're going to hold on to it. And it processes it different. Heather, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so as you and Sheree kind of were going back and forth, something that came to mind to me is recognizing that, well, first of all, it came where I was being thanked. You said, has someone ever thanked you for something? And so recognizing that I've been thanked for things that come naturally for me that weren't like a big effort, but then also it brought to mind things that the person I'm writing about has done that comes naturally to me, but does not for them, which makes me like more appreciate, like, wow, they did this and it was not easy for them. Like,
Yes.
then it makes what they did a bigger deal because it's like, wow, I was asking them to go way out of their comfort zone or do something that's very hard for them, and they did because they love me, not because they wanted to. So it makes me more appreciate what's, I don't know, just more deeper appreciation for that.
Okay, you've hit on so many key things there. I think my experience with my mom was as impactful as it was. Anyone could get down and wash somebody else's feet and they might just get a, what are you doing, weird look. But in that moment where chemo had affected my mom so completely, it was not a simple task. And you're absolutely right. If we can look at, and that's exactly where we're going with this, you've clarified it so well. If we can look at how easy or hard something is for someone, instead of just going, well, I do this all the time, why are you struggling with it? And that's where we're trying to get to, is really recognizing, what does it cost them to see that the task you've assigned someone is super simple, versus seeing, oh, there are so many other things going on, and even though it is simple, it's one more thing on that pile that somehow needs to fit in, changes the weight of what they're doing for us. And like you said there, they're communicating to us that they love us. And that's one of the huge keys in here, is we can get better at seeing the cost of what other people have done for us. If we can get better at recognizing how much people go out of their way sometimes to do things that we need. And then we can ask, why are they doing that? In a video game-esque kind of way, can be the character that's running around and just picking up random fragments of heart, of love, that were just sitting there, but we hadn't collected them yet. It really can have that effect of us recognizing, wow, they do this because they love me. Maybe they don't say they love me that often, but this helps show me that. It can change how I feel internally. If I feel unloved, unaccepted, unheard, maybe they don't focus on all of my words all the time, but they do these things because they see that I have a need, and they do them without question. Yeah, I'm trying to polish something that you delivered in an already polished format. But as we consider cost, like I said, this one can be the most hard to nail down because we don't know exactly what it costs them. If something seems super easy, super simple, and it's not, well, even if it is, if it's super easy and super simple for them, we still have to recognize that even just the consistent reps, the weight that one person lifts in the gym seems easy for them, but might be super hard for me. If we can apply that kind of logic to some of these things that people do for us and have done for us for years and years and years, just the willingness to continue to go to the gym and show up. They've built some strength over time, and it may seem simple to them now, but it wasn't always simple for them, and they put time into perfecting that. So does that help? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. So the next step on our worksheet is gratitude for that cost. And this one is really just a question of yes, no. Am I currently grateful for that cost? If I was never aware of that cost, it's probably a no or a muddy yes. But if it's something that I have been aware of, is it something that I just take for granted, or is it something that I have really been grateful enough for? And again, personal answers on this one. I don't know that we need to spend a ton of time in this one. The next step after that is a question of what is our current expression of gratitude for that thought? And the answer on this one could range anywhere from nothing, I haven't been thanking them for this, to, well, I do give them thanks on this level. I do this or that or the other to help them understand it. And the reason that we want to look at that is to figure out if what we're doing to thank them is having impact or not. And again, this is probably one where you could approach the other person and find out, hey, I noticed you do this thing. It might seem like a strange question, but do you feel adequately thanked in that? And no one's going to say, oh, well, I require X amount of thanks and you have never given X amount of thanks. But in the same breath, we've all been on the receiving end of this, where we put effort in, and not that we put it in just so someone will notice and say, hey, I saw you put in that effort. That was fantastic. You're the most amazing person ever. But we've been thanked in moments where it wasn't expected. And all of a sudden we go, I'm glad they noticed that. That has an impact on us. Is this landing? Is it making sense? Okay. And then our final question here. Well, before we go to the final question, the idea of the current level of thanks. Is there anything, and this may be stepping into stuff people don't want to share, and if so, I get it. But is there anything on this list that just immediately stands out to you as, oh wow, my current level of thanks is not what it should be? Does anyone have anything that jumped out at them and made them go, oh hey, wow, I already see obviously where I'm going with this?
Well, I liked how you said to ask them. I've never thought of asking somebody if they feel appreciated or if I'm thanking them enough.
Well, and it can seem, like I said earlier, very transactional if we try and do it that way. And some people will be a little weirded out by that kind of question. But if it's not just a, hey, we're driving the car and the conversation was completely different and I throw it out there, but if it's that we have a conversation that builds towards that and makes sense, yeah, it can very much be that they are given the chance to open up and go, yes, I do feel thanked in that, and I appreciate that you make that effort. Or it can be, you know what? Just the fact that you're asking that shows me that you see more than I think you see, and that makes me feel appreciated already. Yeah, it can definitely have some effect.
Well, the one thing I was thinking was, you know how your mind just can raise so many thoughts all at once. And I started going through different people in my life that I haven't thanked enough. And I do. I have a lot of people who have told me that I thank them a lot and I show a lot of gratitude. But I am thinking of all these unseen things many people have done to me that I don't feel I have thanked them enough. And it's not the person I was working with, but all these other people. I now want to go through this process a few times over and over. It's a very good journaling aspect to bring more deeper gratitude.
Well,
So
and
thank you.
hit on something indirectly there that is super valuable as well. I don't know, just like I said, width of blessings versus depth of blessings. I don't know that there's anyone out there that's saying, okay, here's the checklist of all the things I've done for you, and I expect that you tell me thanks for each of these things. That will keep it very shallow as well. But if you go to someone and you say, you know, I recognize I don't see everything that you do, and there's no way that I will ever completely see everything you do, but here's this one thing that I do see, and here's the effect it had on me and why I appreciate that so much. You've driven that connection deeper in a way that anchors itself more fully as well. It's not just, here's a list of all the things you did and here's the exact checkbox thanks for each of those. It's, hey, let's pause for a moment together. And wow, I mean, I talked in the book, or I talk in the book, and I talked in the presentation about the idea of giving someone the bouquet of balloons where the balloons are not inflated. This is inflating that balloon. I was super cautious about picking that metaphor because to me, it also brings to mind hot air, and we don't want to just give people hot air, but we're giving people thanks all the time. And what you've hit on there, Cherie, the idea of going to someone and recognizing a little more. There's always the question of, have I recognized enough of the little more? So I think someone else had unmuted for a second there. Have we already hit on everything everyone wanted, or was there anything else? Okay, so moving forward to the last step, I think we've hit on things pretty well so far. The last step is the commitment step. We've talked about what's the current level of gratitude I'm giving or failing to give to the person for what I've identified the cost of what they're doing is. Now is the moment to look at things and say, okay, what should my gratitude be? What do I need to change about it to really have the effect that I want to have? And again, there's no right or wrong answer. And this can turn into a very ego-driven thing again. All of a sudden, we've tried so hard to step away from ego and really see the other person. But this can step into being ego driven in the sense of, well, if I do this, it's going to have this impact. If I do this, it's going to have that impact. And we start setting expectations on the other person's response to our gratitude. And that can be very dangerous because it can be very deflating when we've inflated a balloon a certain way, but we've done it for the wrong reason. And then when the response that we expect in return for our thanks doesn't happen, all of a sudden, we're not thanking them so that they can in return thank us. We're thanking them to try and help them feel valued, but they get to decide how valued they do or don't feel. So I say this one cautiously, but this is really the look for the spark moment. It's not me saying, well, I could say these magic words and they are going to be more valued because I say those words, or they're going to feel more thanked. As much as it's a question of, I tend to think this way, does that work for that person, or is there something else I need to do for them? And this can get into things like love languages. If I know someone is a giver of gifts, that's their love language, a gift can be a very appropriate way to thank them. If I know someone has the need for touch, as I thank them, maybe my hands on their shoulder, depending on the relationship and the space and so on, the appropriateness of that. Maybe it's a hug, maybe it I don't know the right answer for this, but that's the magic here. When you've spent some time doing, like the quote from Mr. Rogers said, what God does all the time, in trying to see people through God's eyes and appreciate the things about them correctly, it invites the spirit. And then that spirit can be there to help you know, how do I give this thanks? How do I help them feel some of what I'm feeling for them? So as you're considering that, as you've written ideas down, I don't want to get into anyone's personals too much, but I would love if everyone could just share one thing that they plan on doing and when they plan on doing it by. And obviously, we're not a coaching group. I'm not going to be coming back and going, Janae, when did you do the thing? How did it go? But I want it to be that sort of commitment for yourself that, yes, I am going to do this. And here's when I plan on doing it by. And there might not be an exact, this is when I plan on doing it by. But if we don't set some sort of intention of delivery doesn't happen. And if this puts anyone in super uncomfortable realm, feel free to skip out, or to even just make something up if you need for giving the answer. But does anyone, before we jump into that, does anyone have anything that comes out that makes them go, oh, I've never thought of doing that for someone before, or for that person? Heather, you are so good with the hands up.
Well, I'm trying not to unmute myself just with the background noise, but this has been a really amazing process. And like Cherie said, I can see how I need to do this with multiple people, and it's brought to mind just so many things. It's also been a bit humbling, like recognizing my weaknesses and that I don't do this very well, but not in a humiliating way, a very like supportive way, but like, hey, this is something else you could work on. And it is something. I think I'm a very fast-paced person, and I need to slow down and spend more time in like the whole page, like Cherie was saying, this is like, to really put this down, it just makes your heart swell with gratitude. And I think that's where you're talking about where the spirit comes in. So as far as commitment, I, like you said, you did find a moment that's right. So I don't want to be like, oh, I'm going to do this like tonight at 9 p.m.
Right.
Like that might not happen. But in the next few days, or, maybe by this weekend for sure, be very aware and looking for a moment that it's appropriate and where the person is in a receiving mode themselves, because this has been just very eye-opening for me. And like Cherie said, multiple people, I'm like, oh gosh, I got to do this for so many people and really make sure they know how much I appreciate them, and that I'm recognizing some of the things that maybe I haven't in the past.
You've hit on so many great things there, Heather. feeling that you have there is, in my mind, the difference between shallow but wide gratitude and deeper gratitude. I mentioned it in the presentation. I talk about it in the book. When God gives us things, he wants us to multiply them. And multiplying often to us means making more. But I like the scriptural word of magnify instead. Magnifying our gratitude, deepening it in a way that I could be very tied to someone because of the plethora of things that they do for me. But I often, if that gratitude is superficial or less deep than it could be, superficial sounds a little too negative, I think. If that gratitude is less than it could or probably should be for the weight of the effort they've put in, I see them as replaceable. I see them as, well, here's the task list and I could find someone else that fits that job description, as opposed to what you're talking about of just seeing a little more in someone. It ties us to them. It helps us value them more, which then helps us make them feel valued more. It is the difference between giving out inflated balloons or inflating them first. So yeah, you also mentioned finding the moment where they're in the right mode to receive. That's key. And if you are putting that vibe, that intention out there, that moment will appear. I'll also warn that if you are looking for that and now you've verbalized it and there's someone who knows that you're trying to do this, there will also be frustrations that come along. He will do what he can to thwart it. But we all know that it's not that hard to put him behind us and still get what we need. So anyone else there willing to share just basic commitment? It doesn't have to be super detailed, but
I will. I will do it today. I might drive to St. George because I'll have 5 hours to think about it.
okay.
I'm not sure which one I'm going to do, but I'm going to look at my list.
Okay.
I asked 2 questions in the chat. What's the name of your book?
So the book is not completed yet. It's in process, but it is called It's Not About You, Rethinking How to Think.
Okay, so when will I be able to look for it on Amazon? Or will you send an email to us? Or I don't want to forget about that.
Yes, I will be, with people's permission, I will be sharing with the group, obviously, when it is available. I have tried to pin myself down a little better on the manuscript part of it, and I'm getting closer, but there's still some work to be done there. But then as I've talked with publisher friends, they all say COVID has thrown such a wrench into supply chain, this, that, and the other, that
okay, it's okay.
soon.
As long as you send us an email.
Okay.
Send me an email. That'll be good.
And
thank you for this. I really enjoyed it so much. I love gratitude and I have got a lot out of it. But yeah, I what did I ask? Oh, about the recording of this.
Yes, and I will be sending out a recording.
Okay. I'm still listening, but thank you.
In that same vein, if you get going on trying to do this and there are questions that come up after now, reach out to me. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Thank you.
Drive safely. All right, Janae or Cherie, do you care to share? Are we there?
I'll be doing mine today.
Okay. And you have a clear vision of what mine is?
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah, I will do it by Friday. Today's not doable. I need to spend a little bit more time thinking about exactly.
Okay.
I have an idea, but I want to make sure that really is the best thing.
Well, and as you consider that, it may be that a direct answer comes. It may be that there's a blank slate there that's an open your mouth and it shall be filled kind of scenario. Put faith in whichever one happens to be. I don't think we have to have it that we've perfectly planned out exactly, but if we go in with a more clear sense of what is it that I'm seeing that does make me more grateful, that's so much better than just going to someone and trying to say, I sure appreciate you. I can't define why, but I sure appreciate you. So if you've got that sense, the answers may just come in the moment that you're willing to open your mouth and go, hey, here we go. But it may also be that lightning strikes and you are very directly told, this is the way to thank this person in advance. Yeah. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. I recognize me going on and off camera, and some of the rest of this has probably felt a little scattered, a little disorganized, but my head is that swirl of magical thoughts that I talked about. And I think the way I speak sometimes shows it, where I'll be mid-sentence and all of a sudden I'm mid-other sentence and I never get back to the first sentence. Like I said, if you have questions or concerns, do reach out to me. You saw links on the sign up page for this. I do offer coaching. I have a group coaching starting next Wednesday, where we spend an hour every Wednesday morning going through not just relationships, but how do we apply some of these gratitude ideas to other things as well. If that's of interest to you, if you have questions about more of the depth of what that includes, reach out. Very much appreciate every one of you for what you've put into making this happen. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It was wonderful.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.